To Stephanie. Stephanie is going to talk on the topic of From Tumblr to TikTok, the gender identity generation. So I'll pass you over to Stephanie now.
Thank you, everyone. So today's talk, I'm going to focus really specifically on one group of children, adolescents, and specifically adolescent girls, because this is the group that's driving this exponential rise we've seen in referrals to the Tavistock over the last decade, really. And it's a completely new phenomenon. So it's unheard of for girls to develop gender dysphoria at or during puberty. This historic pattern is prepubertal boys developing gender dysphoria in early childhood, and that's the group that we have research on and we know things about. But as Hilary Cass said in her recent interim report as part of the Cass review of the Tavistock, we know the least about the biggest group of referrals. So it's around 75% of referrals to the Tavistock are teenage girls. So I'm just going to look at that group. What we know about that group. We have one study, we have the Lisa Lippman study, and she was the first one to posit the idea that maybe this was to do with social contagion as clusters of girls were transitioning together in schools. But really we don't have any research on why this phenomenon was suddenly developed. We do know that the majority of teenage girls who suddenly identify as transgender in adolescence are lesbians. The Cass interim report mentioned the overrepresentation of neurodiverse autistic children and looked after children. We know there's a high incidence of pre-existing mental health problems, previous trauma, including sexual abuse. So, and that's reflected worldwide. So we know that really we're looking at a group of the most vulnerable adolescents. And as far as schools are concerned, I think it's important to know what this generation of adolescent girls are, what kind of culture they're growing up in. And I think again, this culture is very, very new. It's sort of unprecedented. And in this presentation, I'm just going to introduce you to their online world and how those messages are reinforced everywhere they look. So girls are the biggest users of online social media platforms, and it's been recognised, and there's been some research done on the impact on worsening mental health issues in girls because of that. So I think it's really important information when a girl at school announces I'm a boy, or I identify as a boy, or I'm transgender, that schools understand the background, because transgender organisations that publish schools guidance all say that it is not a safeguarding issue. I think we need to question that there are routes to coming to a transgender identity that may be a safeguarding issue. Where is she coming from? What messages has she been getting online? Are there adults who are telling her she's probably transgender? Who is influencing her? So I think there are questions we need to ask. So this is just a representation of her world. And I'm going to start, actually, with part of her world. Because I think there are sort of three main parts to the cultural environment that this generation is being brought up in. So this is an image of the Instagram world of the perfectly groomed female ideal beauty. And the other part, which actually I'm not going to share a slide of, is online porn. And that is on smartphones in every playground. So there you have women portrayed as enjoying the most degrading and humiliating forms of sexual abuse and assault for the entertainment of boys. And so we've got these two images of what women are: perfect, idealised, groomed beauty, and sex, highly sexualised objects for the entertainment of men. So that's the sort of background. And then we have gender and gender identity. So I'm going to bombard you now with images and messages that this generation of adolescent girls are getting about gender and gender identity, and point out some of the themes that they are being taught as a way of understanding these concepts of gender and gender identity. So I'm not going to talk very much. I'm just going to show you her world that she is coming from. So there, she can take a gender identity test online to find out your true gender. So you have a true gender, you can find it by doing a test. In fact, this test tells her that the government is in charge of labelling children's sex at birth. You can do a workbook of practical exercises to navigate your exploration, support your journey, and celebrate who you are. And those are actually the three main themes, that gender is an exploration. You can explore your gender. This is a new task for this generation, to explore your gender identity. And the gender is a journey. So we're all on a journey to find our true gender. And gender is who you really are. It's your authentic self. So whereas sex is something that's assigned to you by usually the midwife or the doctor or the parents, sometimes the government, your gender is who you really are. And there we have again another one, a gender quest. So this is a bit of an adventure. It's a quest, and it's about expressing yourself. Again, expressing who you really are. You can get your own gender journal so that you can write about your own journal. You can get a colouring book and journal for trans and non-binary people, and this is all about self-care. And this is another message that trans people are vulnerable. So you're your true self, but you're also vulnerable and in some way victimised. And there we have the Trans Teen Survival Guide. So to be trans is to survive something. It's not just a quest or an adventure. It's something you have to get through. You're persecuted. You need to survive. You need survival techniques to be trans. This is all building up a picture of quite a quest, quite a journey. This has got cool, edgy graphics, and it tells these girls there's no one way to be trans. We all have a gender identity. It's what we know ourselves to be. It's something no one else can feel, no one else can tell us. This is another important message. Only you know. Nobody has the right to question you. It's our inner sense of self. You can get a certificate of transness to show that you are trans enough. And anyone who says otherwise can go eat rocks. So there's your other message, that anybody who disagrees with you, who questions it, well, they can go eat rocks. They're not worth it. This next one, this idea splits the world into a new binary. So we have a binary of male-female. The binary now is trans-cis. So you're either transgender or you're cisgender. And the message about being cisgender, which is also going to adolescent girls, is, well, cisgender people reign on the trans parade. Those boring, conventional cis people, who'd want to be one of them? It's interesting. So every gender identity has its own flag, its own symbols. They're colourful flags, they're cool flags. And note here that the cisgender flag is shades of grey. I mean, you couldn't get more symbolic than that. That's the graphic that's used at a girls' school. So again, the message is transgender, cool, edgy, a journey, a quest, an adventure, but a victim. You've got to really take care, and those people are against you. You know, for an adolescent girl who's non-conforming, who doesn't fit in, what a great message that is. Who would be cisgender, the grey cisgender? Reminds me of John Major in Spitting Image, if anyone remembers that. And these are just some of the new, exciting, cool, edgy identities that you can have. You can have gender fluid, gender queer, demisexual, trigender, asexual, scoliosexual, panromantic, drag. There are an awful lot of things included in here, but all with their own flags, their own symbols. They all have a level of importance. They're presented as sort of realities rather than people's personal. Somebody wants to silence me. So yes, and the inclusion of sexual identities in there is interesting because it's being sort of posited now by groups that sexual orientation is on a spectrum and gender identity is on a spectrum, and so there are all sorts, and that sexual orientation is an identity. So that's been developed. So this is all sexual and gender identities at a time when adolescents are developing sexually and searching for their identities. It is the main task of adolescence to find your identity. And the first step of that is to find your identity within your tribe or within your gang or within your group. And from that, parents worry about that. She just follows the crowd. She follows all their rules. But that's a really important stage of integration into a group or a tribe, so that later you can achieve individuation and move out of that. So first you establish your tribe identity. It's really, really key task of adolescence. And never have adolescents before had so many gender and sexual identities to choose from. And never before have these been presented as options to adolescents, nor are adolescents bombarded with them wherever they look. So more message: trans is beautiful. If you're transitioning, you achieve a state of gender euphoria, which I think is true. I think once you find your tribe, often for vulnerable children, it's the first time they've felt accepted. These are children who've often felt outside the gang, bullied or ostracised. I think the neurodiverse children, autistic girls in particular, find girl rules very, very complicated and difficult to understand. I did when I still do. They are very complicated. Boy rules are much simpler, easier to understand. So if you feel or you feel that you don't live up to these standards of idealised beauty, or you're not sexy enough, and every other girl seems to manage it and enjoy it, and a lot of girls do, some girls put on an act, but everybody else to you looks like they're doing it and you can't. So socially awkward geeks, girls who perhaps would have been goths in the past, all the sort of the awkward girls, to the ones that have suffered previous trauma and abuse and find things very difficult socially. Suddenly you're accepted and invited into this cool, edgy new gang where the rules are so many. They're so, the language, everything. So you can follow those rules. And if you follow those rules, you're accepted. You're not only accepted, but celebrated, possibly for the first time. And yes, I'm sure gender euphoria is a result of all those things. On the issue of the people who don't understand you, your parents. So that there are adults online who are inviting young people to join them if their own families reject them, which means that a family might be very supportive. But you can be you can be supportive in very different ways. But supportive is supposed to mean you accept that your daughter is now a boy with no question. But there are other ways of supporting a child. But parents are painted as transphobic or as bigots if they don't immediately affirm that you're a boy, that you're trans. And so there are adults online ready to come in and say, if your own family doesn't understand you, if they're bigoted, come and join our queer family, come and join our glitter family. So there's lots of examples of this on Twitter and other social media. You also get to choose your own pronouns. So the pronouns are no longer a rule of grammar, but a personal possession that you can use, and you can get everybody else to use your pronouns, and you can really invent these, and again, the pronouns are there to reflect who you really are. They're no longer there to refer to male or female. They're referring to you personally. And yeah, so the BBC says, so these messages are reinforced throughout the media. Most of these I'm showing you are social media messages, but they are reinforced by the BBC, by ITV, by the media. So the BBC says to boring cisgender people that you can redeem yourself by being an ally, and you can use the right pronouns. But also we have to remember that misgendering someone is violence, so you don't really have a choice. So this is the genderbread person that is ubiquitous in all of the trans lobby groups, and it's going into schools. It's the genderbread person that teaches that your sex is not male and female, but a quality of maleness or femaleness. So it's a subjective quality. This is from Mermaids. This is the gender identity spectrum. And this shows you very clearly where if you identify as a girl, you identify as a pink plastic Barbie. And if your gender identity is boy, you identify as a violent soldier. So you can see what a cisgender girl is, somebody who is perfectly comfortable and happy with identifying as Barbie. And to show that you're a non-conforming girl, according to this model, you have to identify out of girlhood altogether and become non-binary, somewhere in the middle of that, or gender fluid. This is gendered intelligence that say, they really take this to its extreme, that gender identity, is the only reality. So biological sex is a social construction. So they say a woman is still a woman even if she enjoys getting blowjobs. A man is still a man even if he likes getting penetrated vaginally. How you have sex need not affect your identity. So we have young people leading the young. So you can see here how every sort of condition can be interpreted as being trans, having gender dysphoria, so eating disorders, well, that probably means you're trans. Feeling desperately sad and uncomfortable when I have to dress up or dress sexy, well, who doesn't? But that could be indication that I'm really a boy. Just loathing hearing my voice in recordings. You know, anything is indication. So there are a lot of people online telling, you know, adolescents this. If you feel uncomfortable being a girl, if you hate your body, you might be trans. And the idea that's sold is that changing your clothes, hairstyle, or is akin to having surgery on your genitals, having your breasts cut off, is a similar thing to changing hairs and hair and makeup and clothes. Here we have the Kite Trust showing that you can do social transition, medical transition. It's all normalised as a similar thing, and how to access transitioning services from puberty blockers, hormone treatment to surgical treatment. This is a graphic. If you look at comic books, it's full of this. This is, I did it, I had my breasts cut off, I did it all by myself without you, because obviously mum and dad, you wouldn't support me. And I've changed from a beautiful long-haired boy, and I'm now a beautiful, amazing man. And that's the only image I'm going to show you of so-called top surgery, which means double mastectomy. There's a lot of obfuscation in language. And this is Pink News got together with Snapchat, you know, on a project demystifying top surgery, and it was called Pure Trans Joy. So going on to YouTube videos, that there are hundreds and hundreds of these with hundreds of thousands of teenage girl followers, and this one's typical, my 1 year on testosterone transition video, just hundreds of those. Let's go back a bit. So these videos present transitioning as, or glamorise transitioning as easy as becoming your new self. And I think it's very, you know, They get a lot of course, likes, and to get the likes, I think it's an issue here for those young women who are doing these videos, showing how testosterone's changed their voice, increased their body hair. But where do you go next if you want to keep up the likes? You go to the double mastectomy and show your scars. So it's all presented as very easy and life transforming. And if you hate who you are, what better way to become a completely different person, to kill that old self, that girl that you hate, and become a boy. And this is how it's going into schools. The body you were born into does not define who we are, which is a good message, actually. No, it shouldn't. We should be able to do what we want. But what they mean is you can change from a girl into a boy. And these groups are setting up groups for younger children and going into schools. So I want to look at that message that children and that adolescent girls are getting, and to know that that world is what they're coming from when they go into schools and announce that they're transgender, and ask some questions. And these are the questions I think school leaders need to be asking. So we'd always protect bullied children, but how do we balance the right not to be talked about or hurt by others' comments, alongside the necessity of being open about this subject and challenging what children are seeing and reading online? Do we believe those messages? Do we accept all those messages? Should we question them? We have a duty of protection towards students who are susceptible, and particularly susceptible to the influence and ideas of strong or charismatic personalities or groups. So how do we protect those most vulnerable teenagers from political ideology and social contagion if we can't have open discussion? In what ways can we show respect towards those children, students who identify themselves as transgender or non-binary, at the same time as equipping teenagers with the ability to question, think critically about identity politics as we would any other issue? And to recognise that some students have very strong political views about transgender rights. It's time for supporting social justice campaigns. So as a social justice cause. But other students, and especially girls, may not speak up about their discomfort, about their fear of being ostracised from their group. And how can school leadership facilitate a culture of mutual understanding and respect for the rights of all where they may be in conflict? So those are difficult questions. I'm not going to answer them. I've got some ideas. But it is a challenge for schools, but I think it's the key for schools that the debate that we see silenced in the wider culture is also happening in schools. And so all of this material that girls are finding online is not going challenged because people are afraid to challenge it. So when I started in 2015, it was all on Tumblr. Mostly it was Tumblr, and now it's TikTok, Discord, YouTube is still going. There's so many new social media platform sites, and all of them teach this idea of gender identity as fact, and LGBT support groups that are set up that schools are encouraged to send children to will also support this ideological idea of what gender is and what gender identity is. So what I want to just show you from that is that the walls of this gender affirmation echo chamber fortress, how strong they are being built around this generation of children for the very first time, and whether that has anything to do with this exponential increase in the number of teenage girls suddenly developing gender dysphoria in adolescence. Thank you.